How's it going, guys? So I'm Swift, and I'm here today because I'm supposed to talk to you about how to build the tools that developers actually want to use. But if you're expecting that talk, I have some bad news because I've actually decided to cancel it and talk about something slightly different instead. So when I was coming up with the ideas that I wanted to talk about in that original talk, I was coming up with these pointers about how to make software that people actually enjoy using and that they want to use again and again. And I was coming up with all these ideas, and I got to thinking, as a kind of tinker and developer that I am, about why I was coming up with these things, because as much as I agreed with them, I didn't necessarily think they were universally true. So I got to thinking about something that was a little bit more fundamental to my identity as a developer, entrepreneur, and artist, and it's this idea of principle philosophy, which is what I want to talk to you about today. And I realize that might be a term that's not exactly familiar to everybody, so let's ask the question, what is principle philosophy, and do the developer thing and break it down. So the first thing to note is I'm not talking about your school principal. I'm actually talking about the other kind of principles, the ones that help us make decisions on a day-to-day basis, the guidelines that we use when we're making choices. And I want to combine that with this idea of philosophy, which is just a way of thinking about discussing and studying ideas in an intellectual manner. And so when we take those two things and we combine them, we end up with this idea of principle philosophy, which is just a way of thinking about and discussing the rules and beliefs that dictate our behaviors, our principles. And specifically, I want to look at the principles that I've picked up over the years that have made me a better developer, entrepreneur, and artist, and I want to share them with you, and hopefully they can help you guys too. So the first thing we should probably talk about is who am I? Just to avoid any confusion, no, I am not Ryan Gosling. I am actually Swift, despite the handsome resemblance. So I'm an evangelist over at SendGrid. If you don't know what SendGrid is, we're an API company that makes it easy to send and receive email. I'm also one of the founders of Hacker League, which is a platform for people who organize and attend hackathons. I'm a lifelong developer. I contribute to open source all the time. So I have all these roles that are very developer and startup facing, and I have the privilege of being able to help them a lot. Specifically to succeed, like to be better and just to be more productive. And I find that really rewarding. I trace that back to some of the things my parents taught me when I was growing up. And that's because I was their first child, so when they'd started to raise me, they were looking for a good success metric. Like, how would we know that we did a good job raising our son? And the answer was they wanted me to be a good person, right? And by that, they just meant they wanted me to be a successful, contributing member of society who worked hard and did the right thing, right? And so the question they found themselves asking is how can we raise our son to be a good person? How can I be a good person? And the answer they came up with came back to those principles that we talked about earlier. If you lay out a strong foundation for somebody that's based on good things, and they follow those things and they stick to them rigidly, and they don't do things that violate those principles, then they'll end up good. And that makes sense, right? And so they were teaching me things like, always do my best, don't be a quitter, don't lie, whatever, right? These things. And the list goes on. And as long as I stick to them and do them and don't violate them, then I should be good. And that makes sense. But I think the way that we go about approaching and thinking about these things is actually total bullshit. And I'll tell you why. And it's because they're very black and white concepts, right? Either I'm stealing or I'm not, either I'm doing my best or I'm not. And most things that you'll find on a day-to-day basis don't actually fit into this black and white boolean style evaluation. The truth is they're a lot more gray than black and white. We end up using things like pro-con checklists to decide which side of the line something falls on, and we make decisions based on where these things fall. And I don't think any of this should be really surprising to any of you, because we make decisions and deal with these things on a day-to-day basis, right? So, but I think something that's actually a lot more surprising is how we go about answering this question. How can I be a good programmer? And I can make this same argument for entrepreneur and artists too, but considering we're at DjangoCon, I think it's more appropriate to talk about developers specifically. And so when we think about the way that programmers make decisions, we think about them as these logical, methodical people, right? Driven by something like code or math, which is it's step by step and it's either right or wrong, black and white, which is a little scary considering we just talked about how hard black and white paradigms are to fit these gray decisions that we're making every day. But being logical, methodical people we must have a better system for deciding what's good and bad, right? But the truth is it's not, we don't actually, right? So we go around saying things like this, like, don't repeat yourself in your code, write tests, open source your software, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the same old black and white rules that we're having problems with on a day-to-day basis when we're trying to make decisions. And we expect these to handle these super gray inputs. And the even sillier thing is that we get so freaking passionate about these things that we go on the internet and yell at each other because we don't agree with what other people are saying. We get into those arguments like Ruby is better than Python, or you should write tests and you shouldn't. And it's absolutely absurd because we all know that these gray inputs that we're getting just don't fit into this black and white paradigm. There is no one size fit all for decision making. And we seem to still think that our function looks something like this, right? We get a thing, we look at this thing, we say, is it good? And if it is, we do it. And if it's not, we don't. But guess what? It doesn't actually work about that. So the question I would next raise is, how do we know what's good? And how do we decide that something is worth doing? And it's really hard to talk about these things without bringing up this guy, Immanuel Kant. If you don't know who he is, he's an all-around boss, and you should absolutely go on Wikipedia and read his bio. But he's a German philosopher. I think we figured out that he lived in Poland for a while, too. He's part of the Enlightenment, and he's pretty much the godfather of modern philosophy. Like, it's really hard to have a philosophical argument without either denying or confirming the arguments that he made, or some of them anyway. And he had some really interesting stuff that he talked about, especially in regard to morality and how that functions with our reasoning. And so Kant wanted to know why we had this ability to reason. Like, what is it why do we have this gift of being able to think logically about things? And this is especially relevant for programmers, right? And he came to this conclusion that if life was about going around being happy, we would just follow our instincts, right? Like, the choices get really obvious when you're just thinking about yourself all the time. So in that case, instinct would be greater than reason. But the truth is, all the time we do things that are not in our best interest. And since that happens, reason must be around for some other purpose, right? It's for us to do good. So the fact that we're able to reason implies that we're capable of being moral, good people. We're capable of making good decisions, right? Which comes back to that original question. And it fits into my parents' model that they were trying to instill in me. So how do we actually know if something's good? Well, Kant had this three-prong argument. And I don't think this is actually called that, but I figured that sounded pretty good. And this is a really condensed version. I highly recommend reading the whole thing, but the idea was it was broken into three parts. The first part was this idea of duty. So duty is just some kind of moral or legal obligation that you have, something that you have to do. And Kant said that good things always come from the pursuit of duty. So when you're pursuing these moral legal obligations, like, good things will come as a result of that. But not all things done from duty end up being good. And a classic example of this is open source, right? If you think about your motivations for when you're doing open source, like, maybe you do it because you want to be recognized. You want people in the community to know you because you do open source. Well, guess what? That's not moral based on this duty paradigm. Or maybe you do it because you want other people to open source things. Also not duty. Or maybe you do it because you want to make people happy. And although that's like a good outcome positive for the community, that's still not moral, right, in Kant's argument. And so maybe you do it because it's the right thing to do and you hope that other people will learn from it, right? That could possibly fit into that moral paradigm. Oop, my slides went away. And so the next thing he got into was that the morality of an action was separate from the actual outcome or goal of that action. It has to come from that underlying principles that you build on, right? The principle of the will is what he called it. And you can do things that are good that have a bad result, right? Like, you could do something that's actually the right thing to do, but it has some kind of horrible outcome. And that doesn't make it not good, it just makes it like have a shitty result. And the third piece that he had was this idea of universal lawfulness. This is really interesting. It says that you should only do things that you would be okay with everybody else, literally everybody else in the world doing. So the classic example is we don't steal because it wouldn't be universally acceptable for everybody in this room to steal from me too. And on the contrary, maybe you look at something like tests, right? Like, it would be universally acceptable for all of us to write tests because then we would all know that code was working or something like that, right? And I'm not saying that testing is moral or not, or good or bad, but just an example of universal morality. And so I think all of these rules provide a pretty good foundation for how we decide if things are good or bad, right or wrong. And I agree with everything that Kant said so far, but the part where we start to deviate is here. It's this idea of priori versus posteriori. So priori Kant said that things that we do that are good have to come from this idea of priori, which are just things we know that we have to do. It's you feel it on the inside and you decide it's the right thing to do and you do it, versus this idea of posteriori, which are based on our experiences. I totally disagree with this because I think the way that we make decisions every day, it's impossible to separate that from the life experiences that we go through. Sure, we can have this strong foundation of principles that help us make these decisions, but unless you can have some kind of actual experience to build on, you can't actually make these decisions. And so I think Gandhi actually said it really elegantly in this quote. And he says, a man is the sum of his actions, of what he does, of what he can do, and nothing else. And what he's getting at here is how impossible it is to separate ourselves from these past experiences that we have. So I want to go back to that function that we defined before, right? That really naive function. I think it probably looks something a little bit more like this, right? We look at more than just some arbitrary boolean. We calculate the value of something based on like our past experiences and the outcomes that come along with them. And if we don't have anything in our experience that would fit that paradigm, then we weigh the good against the bad, store it in memory, and come back to it later because we're always building. So essentially, we come up to the sum of our experiences, right? Like we are this value, and the best thing we can ever possibly do is optimize our experiences so that this function yields the highest possible result. We have the biggest possible pool of things to draw on and make decisions as we're going through life. And so there's two ways that you can go about doing this. The first one is firsthand experiences, which are pretty obvious. Those are the things that we're doing every day, like going around, making choices, making decisions, and the results of those. And the second part is why things like this conference are so freaking important. It's these network experiences. Now, these are the experiences that your friends, your mentors, your family, your peers, they've gone through, and they share with you so that you have a bigger foundation on which to work. And so you can kind of think about DjangoCon as like this giant experience orgy, right? Like everybody has these great experiences they can share with you to help you be more equipped to make these decisions. And this is because everything looks different from the trenches, right? Unless you've gone through something or know someone who's gone through something, it can be really hard to make the right decision. So the knowledge in this room and the knowledge that you get from meeting people and talking and making actual choices, the foundation that we use to make these choices as to what's good and what's bad, whether it's a good person, good program, or whatever. And so now we've talked a lot about the theory about why we make decisions, about what makes something good and bad, about how important principles are for building up this foundation and how important the experiences of ourselves and others have. But now I want to get a little bit more into practice. I want to tell you a story about something that gave me a ton of value and how it made me a better programmer, entrepreneur, and artist. And I hope this helps you too. And it's actually about Little League. And so this talk could actually have been called Things I Learned from Little League That Made Me a Better Programmer, but I decided not to go with that. So if you don't know what Little League, it's a suburban American tradition for little kids to get together on Saturdays and play baseball. And then their parents come and watch them and cheer and maybe drink beer and hang out, but whatever. The point is the kids get together to play baseball. It's like very amateur baseball. And I played Little League from the time that I was first eligible until the last day I was eligible. And it wasn't because I was a good baseball player. It was actually quite the opposite. I was horrible. I could not have been worse at baseball. I could barely catch the ball. I definitely couldn't throw it. And sometimes when I would swing the bat, I would let go and it would almost hit people. So it was a really horrible experience, and I hated it. And it was not enjoyable for me. And I really wasn't motivated to play because I wasn't good. And so I really wanted to quit. So I approached my parents one day and I said, Mom, Dad, I know you think it's a good thing for me to go out and play Little League with everybody because, I'm meeting kids, I'm doing something athletic, whatever. But the truth is, I hate it. I don't want to do it anymore. I quit. My parents looked at me and they said, hang on, give us a second. Let's go talk about this. So they go outside, they talk things through, they come back and they said, son, I'm sorry, but we're not raising a quitter. You're going to finish Little League. And instead of this motivating me to go out and try to find some kind of value from this thing, instead, it made me even more unmotivated to actually do well in baseball. So instead of actually just going and sitting the bench and playing out in right field, I would do things like go to right field and lay down because then the coach would pull me out, so I didn't actually have to even be there. I found reasons to sit the bench, which is completely the opposite of what they were trying to accomplish. And as a result of this, I think my teammates were even more hostile to me because I wasn't even trying, and it was so freaking obvious. So my parents saw this and they're like, how the hell can we motivate this kid to actually try his best and get some good value out of this? And so they decided they were going to use monetary incentives, and that sort of worked. So what they said was, if you ever hit a home run, hit the ball over the fence, then we will give you $100. And when you're 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 years old, $100 is a lot of money, especially for something that I'm not actually doing any physical labor for. I'm actually just playing baseball. So I got in my head that I really wanted to do this. And so things started to change, right? Like I would go to baseball and I would get up to bat and I would actually try to swing at the ball. And don't get me wrong, this was a really rocky path, right? Like I sucked. I wasn't good and it wasn't gonna get better overnight. And it had nothing to do with how I was motivated. It was just the fact that I was really bad at baseball. So I would swing the bat and a couple of times I'd just like completely strike out and miss. But I stopped throwing the bat when I was actually hitting it. And so finally I started hitting the ball. Things were getting better. Usually it would get caught and I would get out, but like, we were on the right track here. I was making progress. And so the next part of this story comes towards the end of my Little League career. It wasn't the last game. We weren't winning. The bases weren't loaded. It wasn't some dramatic, awesome experience, but I get up to bat, and I'm like, man, I only have a couple of chances left at this. I'm hitting this home run this time. This is coming. So I get up to bat, and I'm ready, and the pitcher throws the ball. I close my eyes, and I swing as hard as I can at this ball, and I make contact. I can hear it, right? And I look, and the ball is going, and it's going, and it's heading towards the fence. I'm like, oh my God, I finally did it. It's going over that fence. I watch it, and it comes down just short of the fence. And I'm like, again? And at this point, I look around, and I realize that after I made contact with the ball, I never started running. And so everybody is behind me, my coach, my teammates, my parents, and they are screaming at the top of their lungs, you need to run, like go, go, go. So I drop the bat and I start running, and needless to say, I didn't even make it to first base because they'd already got the ball there and I was out. And the sad part of this story is that I never actually hit that home run. I never made it, I never accomplished that goal, but I learned a lot from that whole experience. And in hindsight, I think the thing that was so important to me wasn't necessarily the money that my parents had promised me. It was the fact that I actually wanted to make them happy or proud or show them I could do it. And I got, I think, a lot out of that in particular, and it equipped me to make some really good decisions down the road. So I want to look at these and talk about how they made me a better programmer really quickly, and I'm sure I'm running out of time because my timer stopped and I have no idea where I'm at, but the first 10 minutes? Okay, perfect. So the first thing I learned was to swing for the fences, right? And like this is kind of a cliche, like, but the thing is, having a big vision was going to equip you for a big success down the road, right? And there's a couple of reasons for this. And number one, it prevents burnout, right? It keeps you excited. There's something you're shooting for. Number two, it allows you to take really big risks, which if you don't have large goals, there's no reason to take large risks. And it's easier to translate to other people when you're trying to describe what it is you're trying to accomplish. Like people understand big things a lot better than they understand small things. And so as a developer, this has been like instrumental to the way that I go about doing my job. See, developers have this tendency to stick with what they know, right? If you're a Django developer and you build Django apps every single day, what are the odds that one day you're just gonna go into work and you're gonna be like, you know, Rails is a better framework for this particular job, or Node actually is much better at solving this single problem I have. You're probably not going to write in those unless you have the opportunity to take risks and do things. You're probably going to stick to what you know. But the thing is, unless you set these when you set these large goals and you're able to take these risks and you're able to actually be excited about the work you're doing in the pursuit of this huge goal, you can actually do things like change things up every once in a while. So a good example of this, I was working at this company called CrowdTap. It was a Rails shop, and they had this test suite that took 3 hours to run. And they were doing continuous deployments. So you would build a branch, send it to CI, and this thing would run, and it would take 3 hours, and then finally it would come back, and you'd already be working on another project, and it was red. And you're like, shit, now I gotta stop working on this project, go back and work on this other one. Well, that was totally unacceptable, and so the CTO came to me and he said, Swift, your job over the next month or so is going to be figuring out how the hell to make these tests run faster. Anytime you can cut off of there, it's going to be extremely helpful, go do this. And so I sat down and I'm like, all right, I want my goal to be to cut off as much freaking time as possible. And we'd cut off a couple of minutes here and there before, but I wanted to shoot for the moon. I wanted to go for all right, I'm going to half this shit. It's going to be, an hour or an hour and a half or something. And so I could have done the obvious things, right? I could have switched from Selenium to something that was faster. I could have done some caching. I could have cut down the number of times we're connecting to the database, whatever, all these different things. But I decided instead what I wanted to do is take as many of the tests as I could and rip them out of Ruby and move them over to JavaScript, right? Something that was and I was going to build it on Node, which was a very new technology at the time. And so I did it, right? And it actually worked out, but it was blind luck that it happened to work out that way. And I cut the test suite down from 3 hours to like 2.5, and the test that I ripped out ran in 5 minutes. So it was like the biggest improvement in the test speed that we'd had the entire time I worked there. And the fact is that if I hadn't had that large goal that kept me motivated to keep working on this problem when I was having trouble solving it, I wouldn't have ever been able to get there. And another good example is when I founded Hacker League, right? Like, there was no reason for me to go around founding a company about hackathons. Like, I attended a lot of them, but I wasn't very good at hackathons. Like, I'd never won, ever, right? And I'd gone to a bunch of these things, but I had no track record of success. And when I founded Hacker League, my thought process in this was I wanted to shoot for something bigger. I wanted to help all these people to make hackathons better and keep them good, and so that other people could get the value that I was seeing out of them. So having that big goal was like really good for helping me direct the company and helping me direct the engineering stack that we actually ended up with. So the next thing I want to talk about is having small goals too, right? Like, big goals are important, but unless you have small milestones that you can meet in between, it's really hard to get to those big goals. I probably didn't really do a very good job at this when I was playing baseball, but having these little incremental things to work towards is very helpful. And like, from the time that I couldn't hit the ball to the time that I could, there were a lot of little steps that I had to go through to get there. And also having the right goals is important too. But this is why like things like milestones and bug tracking are so important to my workflow, because having these little goals keeps me motivated to like fix things or whatever, and like makes me know that I'm making progress towards the bigger one. And a good example of this is I maintain a Python library called breakfast cereal, which is a library that makes it super simple for programmers to interact with Arduinos over Serial using Python. And so the way that it works is it gives you like a set of like components. Like, you have an Arduino board, you have an LED, a button, and these are simple objects that you instantiate and you can interact with. But the thing is, like, my big goal is to like have the best library for anybody who wants to use Python with Arduino. But there's a lot of little goals that get me between here and there. And the little goals are like adding different components. So my first step was like adding a button and an LED. The next was adding a sensor and an RGB LED. The next is a servo, and so on, right? And setting these little goals has helped me get from nothing to getting to something that I can actually show off. The next one is you suck, and that's okay. So you don't have to be good at everything. Being bad at baseball was actually a great experience for me, because being bad can be good. It gives you a whole different perspective that the people at the top don't actually get, right? Because things definitely look different from the bottom. So like breakfast cereal, I suck at writing C and I don't want to do it, or Arduino or whatever that proprietary language is. Hacker League, I sucked at winning hackathons, but I wanted to make them better. SendGrid, when I was a young developer, I was horrible at helping myself. And so being an evangelist, I get to help all these other people. And so, like, you know, being the best at something, like, I probably would never have had the foundation and experience to do those things that I did. Being bad at them actually made me capable of being good later on. This next one is a quote that's I think most people attribute to Mark Twain, but I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. It's, "Quitting is easy. I've done it thousands of times," right? I think the quote is usually about smoking or drinking or gambling or something, but what I really want to talk about here is quitting is the easy way out. My parents were absolutely right about that, and them not letting me quit was essential for my career as a developer. So one of the hardest things when you're building things like tools for other people to use is when they don't actually use them. I maintain 30 or 40 different repositories on GitHub, and most of them are completely unused. And that's hard, right? Like, why would I be motivated to work on something that nobody else is using, not even myself? And the truth is that, like, the easy way out is just to not work on them, right? Like, not to fix the bugs that people submit, even though it's only one person submitting a bug. And persistence is kind of the key there. And the fact that my parents like instilled this value of not like wanting to quit and not wanting to give up easily doesn't mean that quitting is not like you can't quit anything. It just means that you need to like give your best before you're able to actually quit. And the thing is, when I was playing baseball, I wasn't actually giving my all. And when I started actually trying, things got a lot better. And so the same can be true for when you're developing software. The end might not be anywhere near in sight, but like persistence is the key, and giving your best and like giving it a go. And even if it totally bombs and fails and you never hit that home run, persistence can be the difference between something really shitty and really awesome. And so that's one example, and I wanted to talk about 3 different examples, but I definitely don't have time for that. But so we've talked a lot about how we evaluate choices, decide what's good, how experiences and principles help us like make those choices and help us be better as a programmer, entrepreneur, artist, whatever. So where do we go from here? So I think that the questions like this one, like how do I be a good programmer, how do I be a good person, are actually fundamentally flawed because everybody has a different foundation, and we know that one size doesn't fit all for these things. And our experiences and principles are totally relative to ourselves and nobody else. So we need to ask a better question. I think a better question is, how can I be a better programmer? How can I be a better entrepreneur? How can I be a better artist? And all we have to do is optimize our foundations to actually get there. So seek out great experiences, build strong principles, things like that. And I've been criticized in past talks for not having clear action items, so I wanted to leave this last slide with some action items for everybody to take away. So when you're out in the world, like doing these things, if you remember anything about this talk, it's look for the bright side when you're going through these experiences. Even if they're shitty, there's definitely things you can learn from them. And even if they're totally unrelated to programming, they can help you become a better developer or entrepreneur or artist or whatever you are. Optimize for having a great network. Make sure you're asking the right questions, things like that. So they call me Swift. I'm still not Ryan Gosling. If you go to my Twitter, it's SwiftAlpha1. The slides are on there. If you're interested, you can also, if you have thoughts or opinions about this, then I'd love to hear them. I want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk. That was really great, guys. Thank you. And so that's the end.